Good evening, everybody. This is Heidi from the What Can I Do podcast. We're here on a Monday night edition with the Cannagram, Leslie.
Hi.
And tonight, Leslie is going to be instructing us on the endocannabinoid system. Did I get it?
You got it.
I got it. Because apparently, there is a little bit of cannabis in all of us. So I'm going to let Leslie give you an entire description, and then I have some questions for her.
All right. I decided to start with the endocannabinoid system because it is the foundation of every reason why cannabis is an important plant. It's important medicine, and the understanding of the endocannabinoid system, I think, is essential to anybody who uses cannabis at all. So I think it was back in the 1980s, a researcher in the United States, which is surprising considering we have had such limited research in this country surrounding the cannabis space.
Charles, why is that?
Because of prohibition.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's a whole other podcast, let me tell you. We will talk about prohibition at some point and the effects it's had on not just research, but a lot of other things. So anyway, they discovered that we have in our bodies the endocannabinoid receptor system. There are little receptors all throughout our body. They are connected to every single system in our body, and they are essential to maintaining health, maintaining balance in pretty much every way our body functions. It's called a homeostatic system, and homeostasis means that you are at an optimal level, an optimal state of health.
So you're not talking about balance like this. You're talking about, say, more of a balance between hot and cold, or a balance between even happy and sad, or something more like that.
Something more like that, yeah.
Okay.
The receptor system actually snags cannabinoids out of your bloodstream, and when there is an imbalance somewhere, like say your immune system is being affected by inflammation, that's an imbalance. If you're depressed, that's an imbalance. There's chemicals in your brain that are imbalanced. The endocannabinoid system pulls cannabinoids out and sends them to those systems to try and repair that imbalance. Now, the reason we have an endocannabinoid system is because our body actually produces natural cannabinoids. The primary one is called anandamide. It's called the bliss hormone in a lot of ways, and it sort of mimics what THC does. So we are producing this in our bodies, and then amazingly enough, there are a lot of plants, not just hemp and cannabis, out there that have natural cannabinoids in them, and when we consume them, the ECS is grabbing those from our bloodstream and using them in our body.
Can you give us like an example or two?
Of the foods?
Of the other things, yeah, that have them?
I actually made a list. So,
cool.
There are herbs like black pepper, cloves, and rosemary, which have a terpene called beta-caryophyllene, and it interacts with the ECS in a way that reduces inflammation. Dark chocolate has anandamide in it, which is the hormone that, or the cannabinoid that our bodies produce naturally, which is why dark chocolate is so popular, right?
Well, what is a terpene?
A terpene is a substance, it's a substance molecules in your in every plant. Every plant has terpenes, and the terpenes give the plant their flavor and their scent, but they can also be therapeutic.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes. Other things that you can consume that will give you natural cannabinoids: broccoli, kale, cabbage. Don't turn your nose up; they're good.
It just makes me wonder if cannabinoids make you fart.
Well, it's possible. I think actually those are other substances
You're
in those
probably right,
foods,
but
including
okay.
like Brussels sprouts and cauliflower, which
See?
will also make you fart. Black truffles, you know, if you can afford them, they have anandamide in them.
No wonder I love those.
And
It's one of my
echinacea. Echinacea also has anandamide and another type of cannabinoid called an alkylamide. And all of these foods, there are probably others, but those are the ones that have the most.
It sounds to me like that might have been a lot of what indigenous people, kind of a basis for some of the medicines they might have used.
Oh, I agree. And I mean, we've been using, humanity has been using, there's evidence going back, a good probably 12,000 years that we have been using cannabis. There is a theory that's going around right now, and it is a bit controversial, but they're talking about endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. And there are some scientists now who are coming to the conclusion that because of prohibition, and I'm not talking just like the Don't Say No era of the 70s, but going back all the way to the 1930s when they first criminalized it, they did a slash and burn across this country. Cannabis, hemp, they used to grow in the wild. They were just part of the landscape, and they went and they eradicated all of those plants. But prior to them doing this and prior to prohibiting it, they were part of our food sources. Livestock animals would graze and they would eat these plants out in the fields. The cannabinoids would get into their system. We would consume the meat. We would consume dairy products and such. And so they became part of our diet, and we were consuming them naturally.
Kind of like the way estrogen is inappropriately being consumed.
Yes. Yeah. It's very similar. And so once prohibition happened and these plants started disappearing from the landscape, the animals were not consuming them anymore, and we were not getting them in our diets naturally that way. So a lot of scientists nowadays are attributing like the prevalence of more autoimmune disorders and cancers to be possibly connected to an endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome.
Well, that took things in a different direction than I anticipated.
Mm-hmm. Something to think about.
Very much so.
Which leads me into talking about tolerance breaks. This is a sort of a controversial topic with a lot of people who consume cannabis. Anybody who uses cannabis, and I'm simply talking about like people who are heavily into THC. You're smoking, you're doing edibles, recreationally primarily. You will often get to a point where you feel like the cannabis isn't doing anything for you anymore. You're not feeling a high, you're not getting the same effect. And the conventional wisdom up to this point was you need to take a tolerance break because you've reached a level of tolerance and you need to just stop using it and let your body reset, and then you can go back to it. Well, more current research shows that what is happening when you reach a tolerance level is that you have bombarded your body with so much THC that it has clogged up the receptors. And so they're not absorbing anything anymore. And yes, if you do stop consuming it and give it a month or two, you'll probably reset and you can go back to it. The healthier option is to maintain a balance. You should be consuming a variety of cannabinoids and pull back on your THC consumption, because once you start putting other cannabinoids into your system and the ECS achieves a state of balance, you won't need as much THC to accomplish the same thing.
So you're talking, for example, CBDs, or you're talking about a different way of ingesting it, or you're talking about getting it from other food sources.
I'm talking about, yes, all those things.
Okay.
And the wonderful thing about the legal market right now is that we are starting to see other cannabinoids appearing in products on the market, especially with edibles. I'm noticing it in my local dispensary and some of the gummies. You'll see things like CBG, CBGA, CBN, CBD. I mean, we've known about CBD for a while. CBV. They have identified more than 450 bioactive compounds in cannabis, and the cannabinoids, the terpenes, these are all part of it, and so many of them are therapeutic. So keep that in mind. If you're going into a dispensary and you're going to buy some gummies, look on the label and see if there's other cannabinoids there. Try it, and you might see that once you start putting dietary elements that have cannabinoids in them, and you are getting a variety of different cannabinoids, you might not need that third joint of the day. You know, you might be okay with just 2. Go ahead and try it.
Oh my gosh, that's fun. So, are you at a stopping place?
Sure.
Oh, okay. You have more, so I'm trying to decide. Do I give you everything, or
I'm ready for your questions.
Okay.
I just wanted to do a little basic, you know,
Why?
to give you an overview of what the ECS is and why it's so important, and how you can make it healthier.
And we appreciate that. And I, who have been doing this for 50 years, that's ridiculous. 50 plus a couple. Learn something.
That's good.
Okay, so the bliss molecule. So this brings up the fatty acid amide hydrolase, FAAH, that breaks down anandamide.
I'm really not that familiar with the FAAH.
I'm not either. So let's see. It talks about a genetic mutation that makes that protein more vulnerable to degradation. So that implies to me, I wasn't right. But that leads to higher levels of the, I see. If your FAAH breaks down, you have more anxiety, and it leads to a higher anandamide level, which means that in that situation, marijuana can overload you.
Okay, that makes sense.
Can you repeat that in better words?
No.
Oh, well, let me try again. If you have a certain genetic mutation that is one of the things that might give you anxiety, this particular genetic mutation manages to flood your THC receptors, and if you have more THC, you can make yourself more anxious.
Well, yeah, and that is a pretty well documented effect,
Mhm.
you know, that can add to a little bit of anxiety. So
Mhm.
that might be a sign to you if you're getting anxious on when you're doing cannabis, that, you know, maybe there's something to look into.
Bringing it to one of your points, it isn't for everybody, and not everybody would use it the same way.
Exactly.
It's very much an independent thing depending on how your system works. Right.
And just to re-emphasize this is one thing you will never get from me. Like, I know that a lot of people who are pro-cannabis are out there saying that there's no harm, there's no risk, it's good for everybody. That is not true. Cannabis is not for everyone, and there can be harms, and so you need to educate yourself, and that's part of the reason why I'm here, because I'm little by little going to educate you about all the positives and the negatives, because you need to have a clear picture so that you can responsibly use this substance.
Or choose not to.
Exactly.
Either way.
Mhm.
I don't mean to, I don't have a position that I'm really presenting here. I just want to make sure that we, in all of our zeal to talk about what's good and what helps us, to make sure that we include the people who make the choices not to, and not devalue them.
Exactly.
I guess that's
exactly.
So the next couple of things, it's talking about the different ways that scientists have. It's very dense. Even with the way I did it, it's very dense. But it shows some of the different ways that scientists have of marking what amounts of THC and how active or passive your receptors are.
Okay.
And it's all good, and I understand it about yay much, and not quite enough to ask questions yet.
Okay.
Right? But things like finding out that the cannabinoid system, it has a presence in every organ, and so they found the receptors in the central nervous system, the immune system, the gastrointestinal system, and the metabolic system.
Yes.
So what does it mean that there are receptors in all those systems? What does that really mean to the user?
Well, it just sort of emphasizes the importance of the ECS in our body, because it is connected to every system of our body. And so it behooves us to feed it in some way.
It's such a massive,
yeah,
almost like skin.
It literally controls everything. I mean, it's very heavily in the gut, you know, which is related to a dysfunctional gut is very much related to a lot of the autoimmune disorders.
That's what they're saying, one of the next
Yes.
things. That's very interesting. I'm also thinking this, if all the different systems have receptors, then I would hypothesize that it would be equally beneficial to smoke it or to eat it or to sublingually do it or to put in your butt.
Well, yeah, except for the butt thing, at least recently, I do all of that.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
I wasn't wondering. I never tried that. I think I've tried all the other ways.
Okay,
though.
and by the way, speaking of the butt, I made cannabis. It was a combination of THC and CBD suppositories for a friend.
Oh my God, I want this as a hook. Speaking of the butt, that goes at the front.
Who was suffering from a very bad case of diverticulitis and diverticulosis that ultimately cost her part of her colon. And I made these suppositories for her, which she used for several months, and they really helped calm the condition down. So there are a lot of different ways of consuming cannabis, even up the butt. And even though we're joking about it, it's an effective therapeutic tool.
It's still funny. I don't care how effective it is. But you made me think of something else that I've noticed in the literature, and I think that this is what I think I've noticed, right? That they've proven a number of different things in terms of symptom relief, but they haven't done, there's not as much strong evidentiary proof that it cures anything.
Well, that's true. And that's why, even though we do have a lot of research, primarily in other countries, there still needs to be more targeted research of that nature.
That's it. They need to have wider samples. What else was it saying? Targeted groups. And there were some research things that didn't happen because of disapproval, and they need to be able to push that aside.
Oh yes, there are legislative and regulatory barriers to research, especially in this country, even with the rescheduling of cannabis that is ongoing right now.
Yeah, that's not going to fix everything.
It's not going to fix
that's
it.
in here too somewhere.
A big part of the problem with research in the United States, say over the last 20, 25 years, is that because of the restrictions, they were limited to only getting cannabis from a certain farm in Mississippi, and the farm was not producing quality cannabis at all. It wasn't representative of what's available on the market.
That's right.
And so a lot of those studies have really limited applications because of the
It was very low quality, it was very dried out, and what was the
there was
third
also
problem?
mold contamination with it. So the results from those studies, I would honestly say, are in question at this point in time. That's why we need more research in this country.
Right.
And less regulatory barriers to it.
Here's a term I don't know, and it's aside a little bit, but you might know it from transcription. It talks about that the THC, the system, the endocannabinoid system, regulates gut motility.
Okay, motility is the way things move through your intestines. Well, it can also happen in our blood vessels, the way things move through, certain passages and vessels. And
so how fast your food moves through. That explains, though, why the terzepatide, there's an interesting connection with the peptides in terzepatide or in the...
Because it slows down gut motility, exactly.
Which makes me wonder then what the THC, I'm not asking for this yet, it's just a thought, what the weight drugs that we're taking, not weight drugs, but you know what I mean, the GLP-1, I just couldn't really think of it. How that and the cannabis affect one another is what I'm trying to say. I'm curious and interested.
Yeah, that would be an interesting study.
And it also influences energy balance, fat storage, how your body processes sugar. So that I find that very interesting because clearly there's something in my body that's not doing any of those things properly on its own.
Right. Well, I want to give you, this is sort of anecdotal, but as far as like the blood sugar effects of cannabis, so I was diagnosed as a diabetic in 2009, and I went on a campaign to make sure that I wasn't going to be a diabetic. My doctor thought I was crazy, but I lost about 120 pounds over the next 2 years, and over the next 4 or 5, medical cannabis came into my life. I started using it more. I got off of a 24-year dependency on opiates that my doctors had supplied me with. And little by little, I was on 3 diabetes drugs, and my blood sugars kept dropping quite dramatically after I started using cannabis products and edibles. And one by one, the drugs went away, up to the point where when I went into the hospital for my amputation, which was not diabetic related, by the way, they were testing me every day in the hospital. And when you go in the hospital these days, they stop your oral medications, and they want to control, if you have blood sugar spikes, they want to control it with insulin, which I always refused because I was never on insulin. I didn't want to start something. But they found that those 3 weeks that I was in the hospital, I didn't spike a blood sugar once. And when I left the hospital, I was not on any medication. I cannot prove to you that cannabis had anything to do with it, but in my heart, I feel like it had some role to play.
Right. The hard part is separating the cannabis and the cannabinoid system from the weight loss per se. That would be the interesting clinical piece. Because you know that they both, I mean, of course you know that they both contributed, but I don't.
Well, it was,
and they both obviously.
It was 4 or 5 years after the weight loss that I got off of the drugs, and the only thing that had changed in that time period was that I started using cannabis.
Well, so now I wonder, with all of my weight stuff over the years, the fact that my blood sugar has never budged, is that because my system is balanced in that respect? Because
it could very well be.
Made sure that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so moving on. The next thing talks about the clinical endocannabinoid deficiency that you were talking about, and it talks about leaky systems. It used the word leaky, which I thought was interesting.
Okay, I've heard of leaky gut before.
That's why I thought it was an interesting thing. And if you have this problem, it's linked to chronic conditions like migraines, fibromyalgia, and irritable bowel syndrome, which is exactly what you were kind of leading up to.
Right.
Also, overactivity. Overactivity is interesting. Chronic overactivation of a particular receptor is associated with obesity, insulin resistance, and fatty liver.
Isn't that interesting?
But it kind of makes sense because we're talking about a stasis. We're talking about a balance, right? So if you get it wrong, you're going to be under or over, and I guess that just makes sense.
Yes.
Like thyroid.
Well, yeah.
Okay. All right, that's fair. Then parallel to other systems. It works in parallel with the orexinergic system.
No clue.
Really? Look at it. Maybe you know it from looking, though. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. No?
No.
Well,
I've never seen that term before.
Now you see what happens when people who basically read really, really well find something they don't know about going, Okay, but wait. All right.
I'm wanting to grab my phone and figure out what it is.
What's interesting is maybe one of you guys could look. Do you mind, Lydia? Will you look up the word? It's OREX.
Hold on.
Okay. And see, the problem is I don't know that prefix. That's what's driving me. I could get energic maybe a little bit more. That would be a piece of a word we would have heard of.
Orexin receptor antagonist.
Orexinergic. What is it? It physically joins with neurons that regulate.
Orexigenic.
Yes.
Orexigenic.
That's a conjugation though, because that's not what this says. But yes. Exactly. A conjugation. Rex means king. I don't know if that is anything to you.
Substance compounds are neural signals that increase appetite, stimulate hunger, and promote food intake.
Oh, interesting.
So that's one of the self-medicating things I'm positive that I've used it for then. So then, thank you.
Sure.
The reward system, it modulates dopamine release. So it can influence addiction and bliss, which is a piece of what happened for you.
Yes.
And it's demonstrated to help with chronic pain.
Well,
you know
yeah, that's one of the more documented uses of it that is actually effective.
While most signals travel forward from neuron A to neuron B, the ECS works retrogradely backward from B to A to tell the first neuron to shut up. I didn't say that on my own. That was in there, in the report. So what THC, or no, Let me rephrase that. What our cannabinoid system can do when it's working properly, our endocannabinoid system can do when it's working properly, is to shut off neurons that are overfiring and causing chronic pain or certain types of anxiety or triggering.
Yes, that's
like that.
exactly what it does.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's plant THC versus endocannabinoids.
Right.
And this is pretty thick, so maybe you tell me, except probably you can tell me at a level I can understand more quickly than the dense reading.
Well, I mean, it's simple. Our body does produce natural cannabinoids. The plant cannabinoids are the ones that come from the plants, and they're different. But scientists are constantly amazed at how our body has this system that is designed to process the cannabinoids that are in plants that are outside our body.
And here's an interesting fact that you didn't mention to go right along with that. So I read ahead anyway, because I can't help it. The ones that are in our system come up when we need them and they work and they go away.
Mm-hmm.
The ones in the plant will last and keep you stable for a great deal of time.
Okay.
In comparison.
Yeah, and to me that's all the more reason why we should be supplementing with other cannabinoids.
And then how smoking or ingesting actually affects the system. I think you covered this really well, that basically what it does is it attaches to the receptors.
Mm-hmm.
So there's basically little keys that go into your little locks or something to that effect.
Pretty much, that's a good analogy.
And what happens is when you smoke it, it causes this huge rapid spike in dopamines because it turns off. This is a double negative, guys. It turns off the brakes on your happiness system. We walk around stopping ourselves from being as happy as we could be, and pot releases that. Yes, it does.
Makes sense.
Yes, it does. Oh my god, that's really very funny. Plant THC interacts with your natural, this is closer to what you were saying, with the endocannabinoid system by mimicking your internal messengers.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where you were at.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it does it with greater intensity for a longer duration, which can lead both to therapeutic boosts, but also the harms.
Well, yeah, you have to be careful. You don't want to bombard yourself with just one type of cannabinoid.
Mm-hmm.
Or, too many in combo either.
Mm-hmm. So, the boost, short-term and therapeutic. In the short term, for specific medical needs, plant THC can act as a supplemental signal, compensating for deficiency, system management, and euphoria by removing the brakes.
Mm-hmm. And primarily, I started using cannabis myself was to help with sleep, and then I discovered it also helped with pain. Because at that time, this is before I got off the opiates, I was using massive quantities of opiates. Once I started using the cannabis for sleep, my need for those drugs dropped dramatically.
That's soulmate. That's the best part.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll tell you my introduction, which was so completely different from yours, and it's very instructive for teaching, and you can see why both of us are doing this. I was in 7th grade. I was in health class. And I knew a little bit about drugs and things because I'd read my mom's college book. Well, both my mom's college book and the teacher actually both said something and used a word that I didn't know. And they said about marijuana that it can cause euphoria. And I thought, oh my God, what is that? I didn't know if I wanted euphoria. So I went and looked it up. And I wanted euphoria,
Of course you did.
So I was like, well, but they also did something else. They told me that smoking marijuana could make you crazy, and it was just, this was in 72, right?
Reefer madness.
Not quite
Not
there,
quite.
but between reefer madness and definitely decriminalization. It was between the two, pretty neatly between the two, theoretically or morally as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't distinguish at all between cocaine, heroin, and pot. And cigarettes and alcohol weren't even really mentioned.
Well, of course, because that's
so
why it ended up
I
on
went,
Schedule 1.
Right. So also because people of color were making money, not white people, that's another reason it was on Schedule 1. Because the alcohol and nicotine people needed for that to go away to make it more. Well, anyway, the point is that when I got persuaded to try it out, against my will and better judgment at the time,
Of course.
I found out two things. I found out really what euphoria meant. Not the first time. It took several times to find euphoria, but I also found out that it was not something that was going to kill me. Now, it's funny, but the more serious part is I didn't believe them then about any drugs. I thought I could freely try anything I wanted because they lied.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not right and not okay. So when I became a teacher and I was teaching 12-year-olds,
Mm-hmm.
I told them that while you can't be completely sure about anything, in general, if it grows out of the ground, unless it's purely poisonous, going to kill you like some mushrooms, it's probably better for you to deal with in some manner than white powders. And I specifically told them that white powders were a bad idea. If I'd have known a little bit more, I would have also told them that if it was a brown powder, it was actually even worse. But I didn't know that yet.
Right.
I didn't until a stupid choice and trusting a person I shouldn't have trusted led me to a bad place.
Mhm.
Don't do that. That is 3 times that I did something without really knowing the people involved or the substance I was doing, and none of those times were really great. So future time, that'd be really good to talk about. Remember the pill paraquat thing?
Oh yeah.
I didn't run into that, but that was where people of our generation started to go, wait, you need to kind of have an idea of where this came from.
Exactly.
I think that's part of what led to legalization, because it could be tested.
Right.
But
And for those of you who don't know what paraquat
Mhm.
was, because maybe you're not as old as we are,
Mhm.
there was a time in the 70s, 80s when they were spraying with a pesticide, I believe it was called paraquat, and a lot of the cannabis was contaminated and not really good for our lungs because of that.
that's right.
Mhm.
So we've covered an awful lot of this. So I found in some of the latest research, I'm not seeing it exactly addressed right here, and I'd have to read too much for this, but that if people are normal, healthy, have a balanced system and whatever, smoking pot can sometimes overstimulate them and cause anxiety or even physical ailments.
That's true. It's true. That's why cannabis is not for everyone. And you have to be, pretty clear on why you're consuming it and what you're consuming, and the quantities that you're consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly people nowadays seem to get more in trouble with edibles than they do with smoking. I mean, and a lot of people do smoke, and you're putting a lot of THC in your body from doing that, especially with the higher percentages of THC that are being grown right now in the plants. I'm not necessarily really a fan of that.
Of which the higher doses.
Yeah, it's
I know
almost
what
like
you mean.
it's a race,
pushing it.
Race to get the highest percentage.
Mhm.
And I just don't think that that's necessarily the direction we should be going with weed.
It's not always a quality experience, a more quality experience.
No, it
It
isn't.
can be fun and amusing, but it's a much more recreational kind of a push than a medicinal kind of push.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, when I was first introduced to dabbing, I thought that was hilarious. And I was podcasting myself playing Fortnite
Mm-hmm.
and dabbing. And I passed the F out right there on the floor on camera.
Yeah, that's
The people who were watching me were so entertained.
it's a pretty intense experience with dabbing, and you are bombarding your system with THC.
Yeah, and it was right after the car accident, so it wasn't great. Okay, so the things that are most supported in the research and also supported in what we were talking about here is if you have an actual low functioning system.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought I'd give you the 3 specific things that it says and see what you think.
All right.
The first one is childhood trauma. When childhood trauma occurs in childhood, it leads to decreased levels of both endocannabinoid ligands, it says the messengers, but I don't know if I know what that means, and their receptors in adulthood, and sets the system to a permanent low baseline.
Well, okay, I did not know that, but it sure makes sense in my case.
And mine,
Mm-hmm.
I think that explains an awful lot why people with the, what do they call those, the childhood traumas, they're CAs or so, they have a thing that they call them now, but to count them, I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Why those people have a tendency towards doing some drugs. So, of course you're trying to self-medicate if you are automatically set low.
Right. That's an interesting thing, though, because I was never a person to experiment. I was 21 the first time I tried cannabis. Maybe a little bit of a late bloomer because I talked to so many people who tried it when they were 12 or 14 or whatever. So yeah, that wasn't necessarily the case with me early on, but sure, once my doc started throwing opiates at me, I was on board with just about everything.
I bet you too. Well, sure, because your use with opiates that the doctor said were okay was almost had this sort of an effect as them telling me it was all killer, and then it turned out it wasn't. It opened the floodgates.
Yeah, it did.
So that was one thing. The other thing I wanted to say in response, I always do that. I'll have two things, and by the time I get done with one, I forgot the other one. Never mind if I have three
well,
ideas.
it happens, yeah.
Right? It'll come back if it's important, right? Trauma-induced unregulation, or upregulation, excuse me, I read that wrong. Trauma-induced upregulation. In some adult onset trauma like PTSD, the body may experience a 20% elevation in CB1 receptor availability paired with a massive, over 50% reduction in natural ligands like anandamide, right?
Anandamide, yeah.
The brain is essentially starving for a signal, so it creates more docking stations to catch whatever it can, causing some individuals to break down their natural bliss molecules too quickly, and then so in other words, some people that have a genetic variation break down their dopamine too fast and can't experience the full happiness.
Yeah. Which would just lead to even more symptoms.
Exactly. So, and then it didn't talk about, in this case, the chronic pain and the, RA and the other things that are,
All the autoimmune.
Thank you.
Yes.
It didn't talk about that because that's the part that's the most well documented and proven.
Right.
Now let's see if there's anything else interesting. The literature acknowledges a significant gap. While patients are already using cannabis to treat these deficiencies, legal and regulatory hurdles have prevented large-scale, double-blind clinical trials from confirming these outcomes.
Exactly, and that's why there's so much anecdotal, meaning, people telling how it has affected them, but not any legitimate research done. But you hear all kinds of stories from people who have been receiving benefits from cannabis, and I am one of them.
Right? And the problem with that is, though, they're unverifiable. It would be great to do qualitative research. They haven't done that. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. Quantitative research is all the numbers and tests and all that. Qualitative research, what they do is they gather people's verbiage, and codify particular parts of it and count that out and do statistics from that. But it all comes not from testing and numbers, but from
the
people.
Anecdotal.
And
Exactly.
I think that might be a fun thing for us to actually do. Because I haven't seen any of that. Everything I looked at, I didn't see any of that.
Right.
So one last thing from me, the parallels of what we're studying here versus what I'm finding in curriculum are amazing in this. People from around the world, they know what to do, but the institution is refusing to change and kids are being shortchanged.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the same way with the whole cannabis space. There's been just so many prohibitions, but hopefully with more knowledge, we will move along a little bit faster. And, if we could just get cannabis descheduled completely, like alcohol is. I mean, alcohol causes more harms across almost every aspect than cannabis ever will.
And same with nicotine.
Nicotine
Those
as well.
cause hundreds of thousands of deaths every single year.
Yes, and neither of those substances are regulated in any way even resembling the way cannabis is restricted.
No, because the generations of moneyed and landed people have been making money with those two things for a very long time, and that's why other people can't distill alcohol.
Exactly.
So along with deregulating marijuana, I would like to see them let go of some of the other things. I know they're probably worried about killing people because both tobacco and alcohol are very, very, very toxic, but dude, we're already doing that.
Exactly.
Well, Leslie, thank you. This was an excellent conveation. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it as well.
And I learned things.
And I hope you all learned something.
Right?
Okay.
All right. So until next week, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care.